Every week at the Father's house, we gather around the teachings of Jesus. Because Jesus said in John chapter number 8 to a group of people, he said, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings." That's a big if, Paul, right? And so because that if is there, we have Jesus School. You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings. We want to be true disciples of Jesus. Therefore, we need to be faithful to his teachings. Therefore, Jim, we need to know his teachings, right? We can't be faithful to something that we don't know. And so we gather around the teachings of Jesus each and every week so we can learn them, so we can live them out and be true disciples of Christ. And today we'll be in these 5 verses in Luke 10:38 through 42. I think I'm in the ESV translation. If you're on your phone, you want to follow up in the right translation. Otherwise, if you have a paper Bible, stick with the one you got. If you don't have any Bible up, I'm going to have verses up on the screen. Here we go. Let's read the text. It says, as they went on their way, this is Jesus and the apostles. As they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. All right, so 2 women. Get 2 women in your mind. We're going to have 2 women in our mind throughout the entire teaching. So we have Martha. Picture the older sister. How many of you ladies are an older sister? Good, okay. You might be a Martha. How many of you same ladies are also a younger sister? That's not confusing at all. Okay, that doesn't work anymore. Okay. Martha, older sister. Mary, younger sister. All right? Martha, really good at cooking, really careful about the house, really focused on is everything right for hosting Jesus. Mary, what does it say there? Who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching and let Martha do all the work by herself. All right? Martha and Mary. How many of you ladies have a Martha-Mary dynamic in your family tree? Anybody? Oh, several. Okay, good. All right. So this is kind of typical to the way that some families are. Martha, Mary. Next verse. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him, Jesus, and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me." She's saying this to Jesus. But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha." You know when you say it twice, it means something. Martha, Martha, Martha. You are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. Beautiful, simple story, and that's the end of the story, and then Luke transitions on. You find Luke chapter number 11 and Jesus teaching on prayer. But these 5 verses is what we'll draw from this morning. First, a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. So about 150 years before this time, so back in between, it's called the intertestamental period, in between the last book of the Old Testament and the first book of the New Testament, 150 years before, there was a famous rabbi, a Jewish teacher. His name was Yoshe ben Yoetzer, and he used to say this about hosting. He would say, "Let thy house be a house of meeting for the sages, and sit in the very dust of their feet, and drink in their words with thirst." So when you find a sage or something, make sure you open up your house, welcome him in, sit in the very dust of his feet, and drink up all the wisdom that he's pouring out. And so we see that Martha is living out this cultural sort of wisdom from this rabbi. To sit in the dust of someone's feet, to sit at the Lord's feet, is a posture of a disciple. If you're going through our daily Bible reading, which we have an app on our WhatsApp, if you want to be a part of our WhatsApp, you can scan the code back there on the back. It's about yay big. You can get on our WhatsApp thread and get communication throughout the week. And if you want to, you can join the daily Bible thread. And 5 days a week, we take the weekends off. 5 days a week, we read 1 chapter a day, and we engage in it together as a group, and it's a really great way to learn the Bible. So we're going through Acts right now. So this week in Acts, we're going to hear Paul, and he's going to say this, Acts 22, verse 3. He says, I, Paul, am a Jew, born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in this city, educated at the feet of Gamaliel. This was Paul's statement about himself. Where did you go to school, Paul? Where did you go to college, Paul? The University of? No universities back then. That wasn't a thing. He went to college, or he went to school at the feet of a man, at the feet of a very wise man, at the feet of a man named Gamaliel, right? So he was a disciple of Gamaliel, so is this at the feet of somebody is this figure of speech for who you're a disciple of. Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. It's hard to explain what a momentous paradigm shift this moment represents. And today in our nation, where women are treated the way that they are, where women are given the respect the way that they are, where we see women serving in every sector of society, where we see more women in universities than we see men. Typically, it's weighted over women over men. It's hard for us to imagine, but 2,000 years ago, this would have been very, very wrong. This would have been an alarming thing to see Jesus with a woman right at his feet who's not related to him, a single man, Jesus, a single man, unmarried, with a single woman just soaking up his words. Again, look at some old Jewish texts. So around that time, how were the Jewish leaders, not the biblical authors, how were the Jewish leaders thinking about women becoming disciples or women learning the law? We don't have to guess that. We have a corpus of texts called the Mishnah from around that time, and we have the writings of how they viewed women learning. Listen to a couple of these not so kind statements. If a man gives his daughter knowledge of the law, it is as though he taught her to be sexually promiscuous. Ugh. That's not a great way to view women learning. So fathers, don't teach your daughters the Bible. Otherwise, it's a grave sin. Ugh. Or how about this one? He who talks much to womankind, sounds like somebody who's out of touch. He who talks much to womankind brings evil upon himself and neglects the study of the law, and at last will inherit Gehenna, which is just a Greek word for hell. He who talks much to womankind is going to bring hell upon him. So men, stay away from the womankind. You know, this is what some of the high-level rabbis of the day were saying, which is why when Jesus was so friendly and welcoming of women around him in his company, that the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and all of them, they were like reviled, you know, and they were assuming the worst about Jesus because of what guys were saying around that time. But here's Mary, sitting at in the very dust of Jesus' feet and drinking in his words with thirst. There's a little picture there that I just looked at a lot. Sometimes it's good to read a Bible story in the Gospels, then Google image like that story, and then just stare at that for a little while. It's amazing how art can just make it come alive. I've looked at this picture a lot this week. There's Mary, sitting in the dust of Jesus' feet, soaking in his words. She's discovering what the people of Nazareth felt just a few months earlier when they marveled at the gracious words that came from Jesus' mouth. In Luke 4, which Rusty will often bring up, Luke 4, when Jesus was in his hometown of Nazareth, and he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me too. And he talks about those 4 or 5 things that the Spirit of the Lord has anointed him to do in the earth. As soon as he was done with that, all the people of Nazareth marveled at the gracious words coming from his mouth. And now Mary's experiencing those gracious words. The temple officers, just about a month from now, the Jewish leaders will send temple officers, policemen, to go arrest Jesus. But they won't arrest Jesus. And when they come back, the Pharisees are like, why didn't you arrest him? We sent you to arrest him. And they said, well, no one ever spake like this man. We've never heard anybody speak like him before. And she's discovering that same thing. She's thinking, I've never heard anybody teach like this man. She's discovering what Peter meant. When in John chapter number 6, a whole bunch of disciples all go away. They all go away, well, walk away from Jesus. And Jesus looks at the 12 and says, will you also go away? And Peter says, where will we go? You have the words of eternal life. Bill Johnson rephrases it and says, when you speak, we come alive inside. I like that. And she's coming alive inside at his feet. She says, Martha, the clanging of dishes won't pull me from this moment. I'm coming alive inside at his feet. She's discovering what Paul meant when he wrote in Colossians. All the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are hidden in that man. All the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are found in him. I'm not leaving his feet. She's discovering what John meant in John chapter number 1 when he described that Jesus is the creator incarnate. Croy right now is in biology, and he's got all these fascinating facts that he gives me every day about the human body. He is in awe right now of how amazing the human body is, right, in his schooling. And every time he tells me something, I say, we always bring it back to the Lord. Can you believe what a genius God is to make all this happen just naturally, automatically? The creator of the universe. Imagine the wisdom of that creator. The insight, the understanding that the creator has. She's sitting at the creator's feet. It was him, before he left heaven, that created the universe. You're not going to pull me away from this moment. I wonder if she realized that all of history hinges on this man. Our calendars changed, right? AD and BC literally hinged on this man. All of human history hinges on this man's life. Don't try to pull me away from this moment. Jesus said to Martha, one thing is necessary. One thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion. She's discovered the one thing, which will not be taken away from her. That's a way of him saying, I'm not going to tell her to go help you with the dishes. That's basically what he said. Oh, she's discovered the one thing, and she ain't going to help you prepare. Sorry, Martha, to disappoint you. Sitting at Jesus' feet takes time, which may be our greatest sacrifice, is it not? In a land of abundance like we have here, money is not always the greatest sacrifice that we can give. Time is. We love our time. We're very particular with our time, are we not? It takes the sacrifice of time. It takes courage. It takes humility. It takes single-mindedness. Sitting at Jesus' feet, you will feel pressured to do something else. There will be Marthas who say, that's a waste of time. There are other things to do right now. You will feel pressured to do other things than sit at his feet. Yes. You will be misunderstood, even by those closest to you. If you sit at Jesus' feet, just learn from him. Those closest to you will say, what are you doing? You'll be misunderstood. Approximately 6 months later, 6 months after this story, the same Mary will do something very significant. She will value Jesus so much and believe his words so literally that he's going to rise from the dead that she'll break a bottle of perfume and anoint his feet with a bottle of perfume that cost her a year's wages. So think about how much you make per year. It's different for many of us. Think about how much you make per year. Now, a bottle of perfume or cologne that costs that much, breaking it so that she can get every drop on his feet to anoint his feet for his burial. And she did that just days before he died. This is the same Mary. I think if she doesn't sit at his feet at dinner, that she won't be here 6 months later. I think she was learning from him, and that the teachings that she got grew over the next 6 months and led her to do what she did. But in these two events, Mary is a wonderful model for us, is she not? She models for us these two foundational actions of a disciple: learning from him and worshiping him. These are foundational. We build everything else, we build our entire faith up from that. We take time to just sit and learn from him, and we worship him. Thankfully, this is not just a historical story. Jesus is still alive, and so we still learn from him. He's the ascended rabbi. He was the rabbi there in her home. He's the ascended rabbi now who still teaches. And she worships his feet and gives him extravagant worship there, and we gave him extravagant worship this morning. And he felt just as loved by the extravagant worship that happened this morning as when Mary fell at his feet and broke the alabaster box of oil. So if you find yourself like Martha, distracted, anxious, and troubled about many things, that's how she was described in our story. Distracted, anxious, and troubled about many things, then my simple encouragement to you this morning is get to his feet. Get to his feet. I wanted to give a really great teaching today about politics, and I was going to probably use whose inscription's on this coin, and I was going to talk about that political thing there. I was very excited about it. And then the Lord just spoke 5 words to my spirit like a trumpet, like John on the Isle of Patmos. Okay, it wasn't quite that dramatic, but like a trumpet. He said, "Get them to my feet." All right, teaching changed. And so this is what came out of it. Because the Lord said for us that he wants us to get to his feet. So let's bridge the cultural gap briefly this morning. Do you sit at rabbi's feet? In a way, yes. You and I both sit at rabbi's feet. Now, we don't do it typically formally. We do it informally. We do it through podcasts, digitally, right? Through books and through videos. So think about the author that you've read the most in your life, that you've learned from the most. Think about that author, other than Jesus, other than the Bible. What author have you learned from the most? Okay, you've sat at that rabbi's feet. That's been you sitting at his feet. Whose videos do you watch the most on YouTube? I know who I watch the most. Whose do you watch the most? That's you sitting at their feet. Podcasts, you get the idea. We still sit at rabbi's feet. Lots of different voices, and we'll get all excited, and so we'll binge this one particular preacher or this one particular prophet or this one particular whatever. And that's a form of us, just like Paul at Gamaliel's feet. That's us sitting at their feet, learning from them. This week I considered all the different rabbis that I've sat under, all the different authors and preachers and prophets that I've gotten so excited about and read everything that they have. And I've thought about what fruit that has produced. I counted up, I looked in my Kindle library, I'm a Kindle reader, and I counted hundreds of digital books, not print books. I've had hundreds of print books before, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of digital books from the last few years that I've read, ebooks and audiobooks, and then I find all their stuff on YouTube. I've sat at lots of rabbis' feet over the last few years. And I thought about what fruit has that produced in this church, in my family, in my life. And then Jesus said, now think about the things that I've taught you. And what fruit has that produced? Way different. You can't even compare the two. So a brief little history here. I just have about 10 things, but these are the things that Jesus has taught us directly as we've sat at his feet and been faithful to sit at his feet over the last few years. And those of you who haven't been here as long, I'll catch you up real quick with just a statement about each. As we've gotten to Jesus' feet and sat there, here's the things that he's taught us directly. Number one, he gave us the garden method for inner healing, which we use all the time in our Rapha rooms. Jesus taught us through the parable of the soils that the heart is like a garden, And that Jesus, if we invite Jesus into the garden of our heart, he will reveal to us the thorns and the rocks and the things hidden in the soil. He'll reveal to us the condition of our soil, how receptive it is to truth, and then he'll actually help us to till that soil. And it's an entire inner healing method that the Lord just gave us directly. We didn't learn it from a book. And how much fruit has that borne in the lives of people who've been to this house? How about the prophecy model? We were learning prophecy around here, and we were really excited. I was learning from men like Jack Deere and Sam Storms and Kirk Bennett and all these people about prophecy. And then all of a sudden, the Lord just dropped in our spirit that Revelation 2 and 3 is Jesus prophesying. It's a model for prophecy, and if we'll follow that, we'll be able to prophesy like Jesus. It wasn't read from a book, and now we use that each and every week to prophesy on Wednesdays. We've done conferences and trainings where hundreds and hundreds of people have learned to prophesy in a way that Jesus taught us to prophesy. How about our very name, the Father's house? This is from Jesus. Jesus says, my Father's house shall be called a house of prayer. And he gave us that name. He gave us that name. I was a part of the committee that sat in our living room in St. John, Indiana, and said, what should we name this new church that we're going to plant back in 2013? And we Googled a bunch of different names. We all had our votes, and we voted on Faithway. We voted on Faithway. And then the Lord Jesus came several years later and said, I have a better name for you. You're the Father's house. And how much fruit has that produced? Like, that's changed us. Just him calling us that. This phrase, I am in Jesus and Jesus is in me, has really captured us over the last year, hasn't it? That was from Jesus. He says, this is the Christian life in two statements. I am in Jesus and Jesus is in me. How about Jesus is not only our hero, he's also our model. That little statement has given us has helped us gain a lot of ground, that Jesus is our model, not only our hero. He taught us that. He invited us into the throne room. He said, come in and experience what life is like for me on the throne, interceding for the nations. And how have we grown in our understanding of the throne room? That sent us to the book of Hebrews and the book of Revelation. And now the throne room is like a place where we've gone many times together in the Spirit, so to speak. And we understand the dynamics of that place, not from a book. Not one book taught us that. It was just Jesus. The Spirit baptizer. We learned that Jesus is a Spirit baptizer. And we learned that we need to ask for this baptism. We need to ask for this infilling. And so how many of us over the years have asked, and the Lord has been faithful to baptize us with his Spirit? We've discovered Christ's heart for healing in the Gospels. We're just reading the Gospels over and over and over, and we say, oh my goodness, Jesus, this new statement just all of a sudden hits us that your heart is for healing. I'm going to align with that. I'm going to pray into that. I'm going to believe that. And now we have seen people healed in this room, supernaturally healed, because we've discovered his heart's for healing. He taught us that. The power of ephata. Remember that? Jesus taught us that. Ephata. That was an Aramaic word. You'll find it in Mark chapter number 7. Jesus found a man who his ears were plugged up and he was deaf. He had a problem with his tongue. And so Jesus touched his ears and he touched his tongue. And Jesus said, Ephata, which means be opened. And we have experienced him doing that to us. How many of you have had your ears opened so that you can hear God now? You've had your tongue loosed so that you can speak forth. The blessings of God can pour forth from your tongue. Ephata. Then there's the same works, John 14:12. A verse you can't get around, right, Carl? You can't get around John 14:12. Whosoever believes in me will do the same works that I've done and even greater works because I go to the Father. Jesus said, whoever believes in him, whoever believes in Jesus will do the same works he did. Whew, that's a tall task. Have you seen the works that he did? And so what has that done? That like arrested us. We couldn't get away from it. We're supposed to do the same works as Jesus. Okay. We better learn about spiritual gifts. And then 2 kingdoms. How many of you have been, your Rafa room teams, how many of you have been in a prayer room over the last couple of weeks where you've heard this idea of 2 kingdoms and helping people to see that they're a part of one kingdom or the other? This is a teaching that Jesus just dropped in our hearts, right? So learning from Jesus as a rabbi, something very special happens. When Jesus teaches you something, It's not like any other rabbi. It's not like anything you can get in a book. It's not like anything you can get in a podcast. When he teaches you directly, remember, the Son of Man is the sower of the seed in Matthew chapter number 13. When the Son of Man drops a seed in your heart, he sends his Spirit to accompany that seed and to germinate it and to protect it and to help it to grow and to reap a 30, 60, and 100-fold harvest. Your favorite author cannot do that because he doesn't have access to your heart. Your favorite author cannot send the Spirit of God into you to protect that and to grow it, to superabound it, grow, right? Our favorite preachers and teachers, I can't do that. I'm a teacher. I cannot do that for you, but he can. So as much as you listen to me, listen to Jesus way more than me. As much as you sit at my feet, to the extent that I really wish this wasn't high. I really wish this was on the ground. I'm being real honest with you. Maybe we can figure that out at some point. Maybe we can remove the stage. To the extent that you sit at my feet in any way, sit at Jesus' feet 10 times more. Because when he drops to you even the most simple word like ephata, all of a sudden it can bear fruit in your life like you never imagined. He's the ascended rabbi. He's amazing. And in him are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And what he told me this week is that there is so much more. This is a great list, but it's going to be 10 times this long if we continue as a faith family together. There is so much contained in his parables that we have yet to discover. You've read it 100 times, but he hasn't spoken a rhema word to you about that yet that will change your life. It will change your family's life. It could change our generation. It could change our nation. One word from the ascended rabbi coming from his teachings, from his parables, from his miracles, from his sermons, from his private conversations. There's more. There's more there if we'll only take the time to sit at his feet. So put yourself at his feet. When I was coming up, there was this illustration that would regularly be used. It was learning how to pray. Tell me if any of you have heard this illustration before. The best way to learn how to pray, to figure out that God's like real, is you set up a chair right across from you. You sit in a chair and you set up a blank chair and you just act like God's sitting in that chair, right? I always heard that before. So that's wonderful. That was a way that a lot of people learned how to pray. And so maybe a really functional way to put yourself at the feet of an ascended rabbi is to get a chair and to get your best pair of Jesus sandals. Now, I don't have good Jesus sandals like these. Josh does, so I borrowed his, and they're really well worn. They look wonderful. To get a chair and get your best pair of Jesus sandals, even if they're Crocs, that's fine. And why don't you read your Bible next to an empty chair? Would this communicate to you that when you read the Gospels, you're sitting at the feet of a rabbi and you're expecting him with expectation, like Mary, to teach you and to make it clear? It's just a suggestion. But sometimes you just need to do something a little bit different to get you in the mindset of, okay, I see, there's a dynamic here, you know? I would rock like this because I'm a rocker. They say the Jews rock when they pray like the people at the Wailing Wall because they picture, it's like how a light from a candle flickers, it just, right? And so you're asking God to give you the light. And so you rock like fire. But could you, tomorrow morning or something, could you open up to the Gospels? And any chapter's fine. If you're not in any Gospels right now, I'd recommend starting with chapter 1, but it's up to you. You can play roulette and just open up to anywhere in the Gospels. That's fun as well. And then just say, Jesus, you're the ascended rabbi, and I'm your disciple. In you are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, and so teach me. And then just read. And when we learn from a rabbi, you don't just listen, right? You also ask questions. And so what I would encourage you to do is as you're reading the teachings of Jesus, you stop, you get out a sheet of paper, and then you ask a question. Now, you're not going to hear an audible answer back. That's okay. But start asking questions at his feet. Why did you say this? And you just think about that for a while and let the Holy Spirit come and answer it. Maybe he'll answer it in the middle of the night with a dream you get. Maybe he'll answer it a year later as you're taking a walk. I don't know, at his own time. But ask questions of the ascended rabbi because he speaks. Sit at his feet, listen to him, ask him questions. I've encouraged you to make it a common thing to ask each other. So what has the Spirit been saying to you recently? I think another good question, and like Chad just asked me that last week and it caught me off guard, even though I told him to do it. It caught me off guard, and I was like, oh, hold on a second. And I answered him. But I think another good question would be, hey, what questions are you asking the Lord these days? What question are you asking Jesus that you haven't gotten an answer for yet? May each of us have a question because we truly live out this reality of sitting at his feet and learning from him. Do you value Jesus' wisdom supremely over everybody else's wisdom in the earth? If the answer is yes, my simple question, and this is a provoking one, and I'm usually not a provoking kind of a teacher, my simple question is, what's your proof? Do you value his wisdom over every other man or woman's wisdom in the earth? And then would you be able to prove it in a court of law? Your rabbi says to you today, come and sit at my feet. I have so much to teach you. And a word for all of us is that he wants us to get the nations to his feet. Get the nations to my feet. That's what the Great Commission is. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I've commanded you. Can I take that last phrase and just say, get them to my feet and let me teach them?